It almost seems like running is a political suicide mission if you're trying to run for governor as a Democrat.
Well, it's a real catch-22 because on one hand, certainly running statewide, as you put it, to use your term, does look a little bit like a suicide mission. On the other hand, one way that you succeed at running is by running more than once. And that's one of the things that's been troubling for the Democrats is they've had a lot of run once and then out candidates. So, none of the candidates that have run for governor in the last several cycles have come back to run again. And so every cycle they're starting from scratch. And one thing that's going to be clear is that statewide, this time at least at the level of the governor, the Democrats will be starting from scratch again, whoever winds up being in the race.
Or does this just say that Texas is a red state and people are Republican and want to vote Republican?
Well, I think what it says is that the electorate is red, and this is something that Democrats will tell you very quickly if we don't discuss it. That is, if you do public opinion surveys of adult eligible to vote Texans, you see comparable numbers of Democrats and Republicans in the responses in the state. But once you begin to filter those voters down into people that actually show up to vote on election day, more Republicans show up than Democrats. Mobilization and turnout is really the problem for Democrats, and they just don't have the means, it would seem at this point, to overcome that. They talk about it every cycle. They're talking about it again this cycle. There's no guarantee that the way it is today will stay the way it is forever, but we're not seeing too many signs of changes right now that might really alter this cycle. We're not seeing more Democratic candidates. We're not seeing more resources flowing in, at least in the statewide races, and we're not seeing the kind of action that you at the grassroots that you would think would fuel this. There are some signs that the Democrats may have some advantages. One is that in national polling, we know that there's a lot more Democratic enthusiasm this time around. And we are seeing, because of some of the shakeups in Congress and in the legislature, what looks like more candidates on the Democratic ballot at the lower levels of state government. Those are good signs, but they're probably good signs in the long term more than they are in the short term.
Obviously, we have some time left. This is early December, and we're not talking about election until next year. What are some of those overall thoughts? Things could change, right?
Well, I think you have to look at the state and look at the national political environment and see that there is a lot at play right now. In no particular order, I think clearly Donald Trump is a wild card. As we've said, people have been waiting for the bottom to fall out or for some disaster to befall the Trump administration. That's not happened thus far. His national approval numbers are low, particularly among Democrats, but large numbers of Republicans are staying with him. So one factor is what happens with Donald Trump in Washington and what happens with Trump and the Republican Congress, who have had a very complicated relationship, shall we say. I think there are other factors that are out there on the ground in Texas. We still don't know exactly how the continuing Harvey recovery is going to play out. Thus far, that dynamic has been that state and local officials have gotten high marks, the federal government somewhat less so, but probably plummeting, given some of the difficulties along the coast and in Houston. I think we have to watch how the politics of Harvey recovery play out. And then finally, I think, we can't have this conversation without thinking about what's going on with gender politics in the country. I think that the ongoing conversation about sexual harassment in the workplace, about these high-level instances of sexual misconduct by national figures is likely to play into the electorate in some way if this continues. Now, we don't know how long this is going to last. We don't know what the impact is going to be. But if you look back in history, for example, after the Clarence Thomas, Anita Hill hearings, we saw a kind of an uptick in both women candidates and women elected officials. Were that to happen in this environment, and the timing is such that this topic is really surging right now during candidate recruitment, how the politics of that play out and who falls next, if you will, could wind up being a factor in this political cycle. It's very unpredictable amidst a lot of other unpredictable things, but I think, those are the three things to watch: Trump, Harvey, and gender politics.
Now, while the election is next year, the clock is ticking for candidates and potential candidates. The deadline to file to run is December the 11th. And this week is expected to be a busy one with people filing to run for office. That's Texas This Week. Now,